You may be seated.
Kehilat Shalom. So, before my actual Drasha, few words on the current situation. For those of you who may not have heard, it was confirmed this morning, not only by Israel, but by Iran, by Hezbollah, that Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, was in fact killed. And couple of thoughts on that. First of all, I suspect that when I get back on social media after Shabbat, I'm going to see proof of something that I've said in the past, which is that you can prove anything you want through selective quotation from Jewish sources, right? It is true that in the book of Proverbs, it says, "B'pol oivecha al tismach," do not rejoice when your enemy falls. But it also says, "Avod risha'im rina." Okay, the destruction of evildoers is an occasion for rejoicing. Okay, and while I certainly, and I think we should mourn Lebanese civilians who were in the area and suffered death or injury and the loss of their homes. If there was anybody in this world who deserved to have a 2,000-ton bomb dropped on their head, it was Hassan Nasrallah. Okay, and lest you think that this is about the occupation or 1967 or the Palestinians, there's a difference between Hamas and Hezbollah. Not that I have any love for Hamas either, but Hezbollah are not Palestinians. They're Lebanese Shiites funded by Iran, okay? And they have not only targeted Israel and Israelis. I mean, I just want you to know what we're talking about, right? They are the ones who are responsible for blowing up the US Embassy in Beirut and the Marine barracks in Beirut, which killed 200 some odd US Marines. They were also the ones who blew up the headquarters building of AMIA, the Jewish Federation of Argentina, in 1995, killing 85 Argentinian Jews, including the parent and father of somebody that I know. Okay, so this is not just about Israel and it's not about Palestinians. I mean, you can argue about this or that as another group, but Hamas is clear. It was clear until this morning, because it wasn't just Nasrallah who was what, it was the entire leadership of the organization, right? And their goal and their mission is not to get back the lands that Israel captured in 67. It's to kill Jews. It's to kill Jews plain and simple, right? Because the Jewish community of Argentina has nothing to do with the occupation of the West Bank, okay? And we're fortunate, I think, that in this country, we have a government that seeks to protect us. I mean, we have literally well over $100,000 of security improvements in this building paid for by the government. They have bumped up police presence around our buildings, our Tashlik service at the lake. There'll be an officer and a squad car there from the county police at no charge to us, so we're fortunate in that regard. But anyway, as I said, I just wanted to be clear about who this guy was and who this organization is that he headed, okay? And I mean, you guys know me, I'm generally a progressive and a lover of peace, okay? But there's no peace with Hezbollah. And hopefully the north of Israel will be safer, and the 60,000 Israelis who live in the northern part of the country who've been displaced, hopefully they'll be able to come home. So that's the sermon, now the Drasha. Okay. In the Parsha this week, all right, and let me back up a little bit. I've said, and I'm recall saying it within the last few weeks, that although everybody agrees that there are 613 commandments in the Torah, no two people who have attempted to compile a list of them agree on what are the 613, but pretty much everybody agrees that commandment number 612 is in this parasha, and it's called Hakel. Okay, Hakel means gather, bring the people together. And, hopefully over the last 12 plus years, I've taught you enough about how Hebrew works. Some of you already know that or knew that, but 3-letter roots. So what 3-letter root is found in Hakel? Kehilat, right? So Kehilafy, let's say the people, right? Bring them together. And it says the following: at the end of every 7 years, in the year for canceling debts, okay, so that's the year of the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, during the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, you shall read this law before them in their hearing. Assemble the people. Hakel et ha'am, assemble the people, so they can listen and learn to fear the Lord your God and follow carefully all the words of this law, right? So maybe a little hard to follow, but in the 7th year at Sukkot, and remember in the Bible, Sukkot was the festival that everybody looked forward to, right? Sukkot was like when everybody showed off their new outfits, and their kids who lived in other places came home and whatever, and everybody would go up to Jerusalem, and on Sukkot they would have a ceremony where the whole people would gather and the Torah would be read to them. Now, I'm not sure exactly how it worked for everybody to hear the Torah being read. I mean, they didn't have microphones, but this is what it says that we were to do. Okay, and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says or said, this is in essence a reenactment of the covenant ceremony, right? Which we had at the beginning of the Parsha, attend Nitzavim, you are standing, all of you, before the Lord your God, right? The original covenant ceremony was at Sinai, and then we had this with Moses, and then it happened again with Joshua, when the people entered the land. Actually, the commandment to do that was to Parashat, to have the people, half the tribe stand on Mount Ebal and half on Mount Gerizim, and to put up the words of the Torah on a rock with plaster, right? So this is a reenactment of the covenant ceremony. Maimonides explained how it was to be done, but we don't really know to what extent it actually happened the way Maimonides said it should. We do know, right, that it was practiced at certain times. As I said, Joshua did it when they entered the land, and I think we can conclude that Joshua is history, or at least reflects history. And King Josiah did so after the discovery of the book of Deuteronomy. And Ezra did it for the generation that returned from Babylon, except that Ezra did it on Rosh Hashanah, not on Sukkot, and it says that he read from daybreak until noon. Okay, so that's a long time, right? And as Rabbi Sachs says, this isn't just a ritual, it's covenantal politics, right? And why? What's the meaning? What's the need for a ceremony like this to reaffirm the covenant, right? And the philosopher Philip Selznick writes in his book, The Moral Commonwealth, the compact creates the covenant, he uses the term compact, others would say covenant. The covenant creates a self-conscious moral order. Most vividly at Sinai, the agreement with God is an agreement to uphold a code of responsible conduct. God's commands are obeyed by fulfilling the obligations to family and community. A social ethic is the linchpin of the covenant, okay? So covenantal politics are moral politics. They involve duty and obligation, and they're interwoven with a particular view of the history of the nation, whose fate is seen as a reflection of the success or failure in honoring the terms laid down by its founder, right? So that it is about obligation. And here I want to say also something about the current situation, because I view like our obligation, right? We have concentric circles of obligation, right? In other words, do we have obligations to our non-Jewish neighbors? Yes, right? Do we have obligations to people we don't know who live in countries that half of us have never heard of? Yes, we do, right? But when people say, well, you know, you talk about the 1,200 Israelis killed on October 7th, but not the 40,000, and I'm not sure I believe that figure, but whatever, Palestinians killed, and, right, I mean, here's the crux of the issue, okay? There are many, many hungry kids in Montgomery County, right? But, Michael Schott, I assume that you make sure that Jacob has all the food he needs, right? Why? I mean, when there's thousands of hungry kids, why not take some of that? I mean, why do you prioritize feeding Jacob over feeding the thousands of other hungry kids in Montgomery County?
He's my kid.
Because he's your kid, right? And anybody who says, well, Michael, your moral priorities are a little askew, right? In my opinion, is literally insane, right? I mean, our first obligation is to our family, right? And then our next obligation is to our extended family, and then to our community, and then et cetera, which doesn't mean that we have no obligations to others, but like I said, it's concentric circles, right? And we're frankly more concerned about Israel because it's our family, right? And again, I mean, and I gave a whole sermon about this, and I may give another one, but if you don't see that, then you don't really understand what it means to be a Jew. Okay, and it does not in any sense mean that you have to agree with or support or justify everything Israel does. Right, God knows I do not, but that's not the point. I don't have to agree with everything Kelly does. She's still my wife. And my primary obligation is to her. I don't have to agree with everything my brother does, right? But he is the person who is the second closest to me, and I have an obligation to him, and then to others, I have an obligation to every one of you, right? And if you quit the shul, I still have an obligation to you because you're still my fellow Jew, but less, right? If you have something important and you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's okay. If you're not a member and you call me at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna send you a bill. Right? Because that's how obligation works, right? Because we're a family, right? But what makes us a family is not merely, or I would say even primarily, common descent, right? I mean, my wife has no Jewish ancestors, right? But she's still a part of our community, right? Now, Rabbi Sachs, and look, Rabbi Sachs loved and admired the United States in a way that only a non-American really could, okay? But he makes the claim, and I have to say I don't know enough about Canada or Australia or other countries, primarily in the English-speaking world, to validate his claim or not, but he says that the only country that has constructed its politics in terms of covenant is the United States, right? And in this drasha, oddly enough, because it's like swinging at a hanging curve, he doesn't point out, how do you say the United States in modern Hebrew? and it's actually not just modern Hebrew, it goes back to the 1800s. Artsot Habrit, right? Artsot Habrit, which means covenant lands, right? Or lands of the covenant, right? So, in other words, and this, I mean, I never, ever, ever would have agreed that this idea is not self-evident to the majority, the overwhelming majority of Americans, but it no longer is, right? What makes you an American? Right? What, legitimate question. What makes you an American? What makes you an American?
That an individual lives in the land of one.
Okay, you live in the land of the covenant, right? But is it just because you live here that you're an American? What?
You're American by birth.
You're an American by birth, but right. If you're born to an American citizen, you're an American citizen. If you are born here to non-citizens, you're also an American citizen. But I'm not talking about, right, in the same way that I said, right, that if you don't understand that being a Jew is part of a people and a family, you don't understand what Judaism is all about. Doesn't mean you're not a Jew, right? So I'm not talking about simply the legal status, okay? I can prove on Americans I have an American passport, right? But what really makes you an American? Say a true American.
Believe in the Constitution.
Believe in the Constitution, right? As Superman said, right? Truth, justice, and the American way, right? What is the American way? The American way is, first of all, truth and justice. In other words, what makes you an American is not ancestry, although that can make you a citizen, and it's not residence, it is loyalty to a set of ideals, right? Loyalty to a set of ideals, and those ideals do not include being a Christian, right? Those ideals include freedom of religion for everybody, right? It does not mean that if you're not white, you're not American. Doesn't mean if you're not Christian, you're not American, right? To be an American is to be loyal to a set of ideals, right? In the way that being a Jew is to be loyal to a set of ideals, right? And the point, I think, is that, look, I've told this story before, okay? I have relatives who survived the concentration camps, all right, from Lithuania, right? And if you didn't already know this, you should, that the greatest Jews are those from Lithuania or descended from Jews from Lithuania, right? But they survived the Holocaust, and after the Holocaust, they moved to France. Okay, and so I have cousins roughly my own age, born in France, speak French, like, the French natives that they are. But sometime after that, they moved to Israel. Okay, why did they move to Israel? Because we knew living in France, we would never be accepted as French, right? Because to be French is to have ancestry going back hundreds of years in France. And it's to be Catholic, right? You don't have to practice the religion, but if you're not Catholic, you're not really French, right? And this is why French Jews have such issues, and frankly, it's why French Muslims have such issues, because you will never be French, right? You can have French citizenship, but you will never be French. And that's true in most countries of the world, right? But anybody who says, if your ancestors haven't lived here since some arbitrary year, and you're not white, and you're not Christian, you're not really American, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of people now who say that about us. And my first reaction, somebody says that to me, like, says that I'm bigger and stronger, is to punch him in the nose, right? But seriously, right, if there is such a thing as secular heresy, that is it. That is heresy against the Constitution. It is heresy against American beliefs. What makes you American is the covenant, right? And so and Rabbi Sachs, I'm going to wrap up. Rabbi Sachs quotes Robert Bella. Robert Bella is like the leading scholar of what's called American civil religion, right? What is American civil religion? It's the kind of things that like are expected to do, right? Like if you listen to President Biden, right, said every speech he gives closes with the following two sentences, right? God bless the United States of America, and God protect our troops, right? That's civil religion, okay? And so Robert Bella says that the presidential inaugural is a secular version of Haker, of reaffirming the covenant ceremony, right? And people all gather, right? And supposed to be the outgoing president too, right? To affirm that continuity. And then they give a speech, right? And so I want to quote from two inaugural addresses, right? Equal time, one Democratic and one Republican, right? LBJ, they came here. The exile and the stranger, brave but frightened, to find a place where a man could be his own man, right? Today we would say a person could be their own person, but whatever, right? They made a covenant with this land, conceived in justice, written in liberty, bound in union. It was meant one day to inspire the hopes of all mankind, and it binds us still. If we keep its terms, we shall flourish, right? And now, George W. Bush. America's vital interests and our deepest beliefs are now one. From the day of our founding, we have proclaimed that every man and woman on this earth has rights and dignity and matchless value because they bear the image of the maker of heaven and earth. Across the generations, we have proclaimed the imperative of self-government because no one is fit to be a master and no one deserves to be a slave. Advancing these ideals is the mission that created our nation. History has an ebb and flow of justice, but history also has a visible direction set by liberty and the author of liberty, right? And I have to say, like, I don't know that I've ever read more profound and stirring words about the destiny and the goal and the reason that this country exists. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary, I think. And Robert Vela says, and he's probably right, that even if we don't know it, the inspiration for that, so it's not every 7 years, it's every 4 years, but we gather, on Capitol Hill to reaffirm the covenant and the beliefs and ideals of our country. Shabbat Shalom. Continue with Kaddish before Musaf and the Musaf service. Hatzi Kaddish 155 or 428. And then we continue with the Musaf Amida. We'll say the first 2 pages out loud and then continue with the video.